Hi everyone, welcome to my webinar. Thank you for joining us. I hope you can hear me and we can get started with the questions that we got off the air. The first question was about ionizations or using an anion generator or something like that. Someone wrote to me that they're asking whether they should buy an air purifier that has a ionization function or anions or cations or positive ions or whatever it is, and wondering if that does anything positive. Um, well, there's a lot of controversy about this in the industry. It's good to pay attention to something in the what we call consumer grade purifiers. And anion generators look sort of like this unit right here, and this little bit, which I'll bring close to the camera, that is the part that generates the anions, or delivers them rather, and this tiny chip here is what produces them, and this is limited to 0.3 watts or less. Essentially this does just about nothing useful. It's reduced in power because if an ion generator or an ionizer produces too much power, then it ends up generating ozone and various nitrogen oxides like nitrous oxide, nitrogen dioxide, etc. These are all quite hazardous to inhale, so they limit those on consumer products to 0.3 watts or less, which makes them essentially useless. They really don't do anything. They're just there to fill up the spec sheet and tempt you to buy them. Going on to the next question. What is a HEPA filter? Well, HEPA stands for a high efficiency particulate air filter. It's a standard defined by certain agencies in the industry. Basically, a lot of again, consumer grade purifiers come with so-called HEPA filter. You have to pay attention to something. Is that HEPA as defined by the manufacturer, or is it HEPA as defined by a specialist agency like Eurovent, for example, or ASHRAE? The manufacturer can define HEPA however they like. In terms of consumer grade purifiers, as far as I know right now, at least here in Poland, there is only one brand that includes a proper HEPA filter. The rest are all HEPA as defined by the manufacturer, which is, well, it depends how much you trust the manufacturer, and I really wouldn't trust them. A HEPA filter needs to meet two essential criteria. It has to be tested and certified, and this test certificate has to be delivered with the filter to the buyer. And a lot of the time, you won't find that with consumer products, if most of the time, pretty much. Another thing is, a HEPA filter can only be installed by a professional, and there has to be an installation record which mentions the serial number of the filter, who installed it, and when it was installed. And potentially, depending on the client who's buying it, they can also demand a test of filtration efficiency. And that's definitely not delivered with a consumer product, with possibly one exception or two in the market. you will probably notice that on most the filters you find, the filter thickness is a few millimeters up to a few centimeters. Um, as an indoor air quality professional, I've never seen a true HEPA filter that's less than about 30 centimeters thick. That's about a foot thick, uh, give or take a few. So a true HEPA filter is quite a fat filter. You know, you won't be able to fit it in a slim panel. So if you see anyone with a slim panel filter claiming that that's HEPA, well, that's simply not true. That's not a HEPA filter. Moving on to the next one. Why is PM 2.5 more dangerous than PM 10? Okay. PM stands for particulate matter. That is very fine dust which is in the air that we breathe. The number following the PM refers to the size of these particulates. PM 10 stands for 10 micron, PM 2.5, 2.5 microns. So they're much smaller. There's also PM 1 and PM 0.1 if you like, but those are not, let's say, readily commercially tested and talked about. Although the smaller the particle, the more harmful it is. PM 10 gets arrested by most filters. PM 2.5, well, when you breathe air with PM 2.5 particulates, they penetrate deeper into your lungs and potentially cause more damage. PM 1 is so small that it can actually go through your lungs and enter your bloodstream. And PM 0.1 is so very small that it will go all the way through your bloodstream and reach the blood-brain barrier, for example. So the smaller the number after the PM, the smaller the particulate size and the more potentially dangerous it is. So that's what these numbers mean. Again, the next question is also about air purifiers. How do you determine the area that an air purifier can service? So there are a few standards pertaining to this, but in general, the accepted standard by most organizations is that air purifier, for it to work, has to take all the air in that space and pass it through the filters at least 4 times every hour. So to determine how big of an air purifier you should buy, you should look at the area of your home, multiply that by the height of your ceiling, and there's your volume in cubic meters or cubic feet, and then divide that by the airflow of the filter. So usually they provide the number cubic meters per hour. You need to reach at least 4. You will notice that there are commercial units, or let's say consumer units, available through retailers that claim they can do up to 50 or 100 square meters or 90. They like number 90, and that's based on 1 airflow per hour, 1 air change per hour, or 1.5. Some of the better ones up to 2. That's nonsense basically. Rule of thumb to make the conversion easy: take your the surface area of your home and multiply that number by 10, and that is how many cubic meters per hour you need your purifier to do in order to match your home. So if you have a 50 square meter home, ideally you want an air purifier that will do 500 cubic meters per hour. And there isn't really any consumer grade units that do that, except the very big ones, and they cost €1,000 plus usually. If it flows anything less than that and claims that it can operate on a bigger home, that claim is just the manufacturer's own opinion. It's not accepted by industry standards. Now to the next question that we got here. What is a filter class? Well, this is interesting. The accepted ranges, or let's say the common MERV definition of filter classes, goes through a bunch of numbers, starting with what we call coarse filters, which go up to like G4 or something like that, and then we have the finer filters, which have a number that starts with M or F. Then we have the HEPA filters, or what we call in the industry absolute filters, and those start from 10 and go up to 16. It's incredibly unusual to see anything rated higher than 13, and even in operating rooms what you find is usually 10, maybe 11. In clean rooms where they have electronics industry or delicate microchips being produced, then over there you might find numbers higher than 13. Also in aerospace industry where they need a very high degree of cleanliness. Worth mentioning here, if you find someone saying that they're offering a HEPA filter and they don't state the filter class, they're like telling you, well, we're offering a battery, but they're not telling you how many volts that battery generates or how many amps or what's the capacity of that battery. It's totally irrelevant data and total nonsense. It makes no sense at all. So they just say that to market the product, to make you buy it. HEPA, not followed by a filter class, don't buy. If it's followed by a filter class, great. If it's not, it means they're basically lying to you, or they're defining HEPA the way they define it. Going on from here, someone asked us, do I need ultraviolet sterilization? And would it help protect me from allergies? Okay, let's start with allergies. No, ultraviolet will not help protect you from allergies. Allergies are not caused by anything which ultraviolet can address. Ultraviolet is actually used to basically kill viruses, bacteria, and other living organisms. It's a very sort of intense ultraviolet beam that would need to be used to achieve that, of course. Again, on consumer grade units, what we're seeing is very small ultraviolet lamps with very low power that are insufficient to achieve anything. So they've just added them and mentioned them on the label to get you to buy the unit. They don't necessarily achieve any sterilization with these ultraviolet lamps. In proper industrial systems, we find proper ultraviolet lamps that are much bigger, they consume a lot of power. They're usually specified when we need a hygienic sort of environment, like operating rooms, for example. So that's when we use ultraviolet lamps. In general, you don't need them in your home unless you have an exceptional health situation. Possibly if you have a child with cystic fibrosis, that might be one of the situations where an ultraviolet sterilization device is recommended. Now moving on to the next one. Masks. Which kind of smog masks should I buy? You shouldn't. If a mask is being sold as a smog mask, you shouldn't buy it. There's nothing called a smog mask as far as the industry is concerned. Masks are rated, they have a system of ratings, EN 149 2001, and nothing per that system is called a smog mask. Okay, you gotta look at let's say a couple of things with masks. Number one, is it certified by any third party? Not by the manufacturer, but by an actual lab or a certification agency. Okay? And I would recommend you stick to something produced locally, maybe here in Europe, because quite often we found that things produced overseas may potentially have, let's say, less than genuine certifications. Okay, And they're not rated as smog masks, rather, but they're rated as fine particulate masks. Okay. Usually, for example, I have a nice example over here. Here is a mask that actually works. Now I'll bring this closer to the camera to show you the rating that's written on it. This FFP1 is the mask rating. Okay. And it mentions the standard EN149 2001, and it's CE marked as well. This mask costs 5 Polish zloty or less, depends where you buy it, and works better than masks that are being sold for 100 or 150 without a certification. Pay attention to something. Some brands that claim to be certified have 1 or 2 certified models, and they stick these certifications all over their websites and all over their retail portals, and they don't tell you that only this model has been tested and certified. And they try to get you to buy the other models, and actually quite often some of those brands will not even stock the certified model, simply so they can continue selling you the fancy looking ones, you know, and charging a lot of money for them. Don't buy a mask that's not certified. Don't buy a fancy looking mask. I can almost guarantee that it's not certified and it's not meeting the purpose. And in fact, the local authorities over here have recently done a study, and they found a lot of masks being marketed as smog masks in fact don't achieve much. So stick to anything that has a genuine certification and a genuine rating. The more plain and simple it looks, in my opinion, at least from my experience, the better it works. And stick to something local. I like to buy masks that are made locally here in Poland. They tend to be better and cheaper than ones imported, especially from the Far East. Next question here was, do I need to use distilled water for my humidifier? This is a good question. You use distilled water to protect your humidifier, to keep that clean, to avoid the accumulation of lime and whatnot in it. Basically, the dissolved solids in the water, they precipitate when the water evaporates, and they form a layer all over the surfaces in your humidifier. So that's why you'd use distilled water. However, you don't have to use distilled water. You can use tap water as long as you're using the cold water, and clean your humidifier periodically with either a special chemical or with plain old vinegar. I've been doing that for years and it's working out just fine. You will see mainly 3 types of humidifiers, and they sort of behave differently. Ultrasonic, steam humidifiers, and evaporative humidifiers, or what we call air washers. They all work. Ultrasonic tends to be the cheapest and the fastest acting. However, if you're not using distilled water, that will leave a white residue of basically the dissolved solids that were in the water. There's really nothing wrong with that, but you just have to live with it, clean it up from time to time. Steam humidifiers have an added advantage, and that is they boil the water to achieve the steam. So in that sense, they sterilize the liquid as they steam it, but the disadvantage of that is they end up using more power. Evaporative humidifiers, or air washers, they work well as well, but they're slower to reach, let's say, full efficiency, and they do require periodic cleaning as well, and cleaning those up can be quite an intensive task. However, they also achieve some cleaning of the air, so they're nice to have. I don't recommend one kind over the other. Try what you like and decide. I like steam humidifiers. However, because of their energy consumption, at the moment I use ultrasonic humidifiers. Yeah, I used to have an air washer, but I got tired of cleaning it, so I stopped using it. So it's really up to you. So again, we have another question which just came in. What does an active carbon filter do? Well, an active carbon filter. Active carbon is a catalyst. It converts a lot of chemicals into other chemicals. It's used in filters because it's beneficial in terms of removing odor, bad smells, and in terms of potentially removing some toxic substances. Not all, very specific toxic substances. I won't really go into that during this webinar, but maybe we can have another webinar specifically about that. Pay attention to something though. The amount of active carbon that's used in consumer grade filters tends to be very small because usually in many municipalities or countries active carbon is considered a chemical waste, so you can't simply take an active carbon filter and throw it in the garbage. You need to use a special disposal for that, and there's like a limit, so they have to use less than that limit also to save the consumer from the consumer. So if you got someone who opened an active carbon filter, they can use that as a catalyst to start all kinds of other potentially harmful reactions. So that's really limited. Going to the professional market, the amount of active carbon in a filter can go into hundreds of grams or kilograms, and they may be refillable sometimes. As far as I know, none of the consumer grade active carbon filters contain enough carbon to achieve anything in terms of long-term benefits. And another thing is, you will also find that they have a very thin mesh of active carbon, usually 5 to 10 millimeters. Sorry. While industrial or professional active carbon filters tend to be 50 centimeters thick or longer than that. So a good bag filter with active carbon inserts is usually 535 millimeters thick. That is the thickness of the filter that the air has to travel through. So you can imagine the consumer grade device with 1 centimeter is really not doing much. It's just, they just added that to, again, tempt you to buy it. It's not performing any useful function for you. Is it good to have a filter that has a Bluetooth interface and I can control through my phone? Well, that's up to you. I can't say anything about that, but pay attention to the actual filtration part. You might like the bells and whistles, but how well does it actually filter? How much air does it flow? What sort of filtration technology does it use? If you're not sure, ask an expert. Another question came along, and that is, someone is concerned about the energy consumption of an air purifier. For a filter to work, you gotta push air through it, and you gotta push hard for a good filter to work, so that uses a lot of energy. I haven't seen anything that uses less than, let's say, 200 or 250 watts that performs useful filtration. Okay, so if it says it's like 18 watts or 30 watts or 50 and it's claiming all these fancy filtration numbers, you should be wondering if it's too good to be true. It probably is too good to be true. Okay, here's an interesting one. Should I use an ozone sterilization unit? This is easy. Absolutely not. As a homeowner, consumer, don't touch ozone. Okay. If a device claims to have an ozone generator in it or ozone sterilization, run away from it. Ozone is harmful for us humans to breathe. Okay. It's good to have ozone in the upper atmosphere that performs a function, but not here, down here on Earth where we can breathe it. It's quite harmful for humans to inhale ozone. Okay. Ozone is used, in fact, in industrial sterilization, such as water sterilization, sometimes in air applications, but under very well controlled and monitored conditions, and it is operated and maintained by, let's say, air quality professionals. The average consumer doesn't know how to protect themselves from ozone, so I would say no. If a unit says it uses ozone as a sterilization method, don't buy it, don't go anywhere near it. Not safe, and potentially it might be like similar to the ionization story or the ultraviolet story, where they use a tiny little microscopic generator which does generate ozone, but too little of it to achieve anything. So just again, so they can put the word ozone on the label and get you to buy the unit. I bought an air purifier and it's too loud. What can I do about it? Unfortunately, now that you've bought it, I really don't know what to tell you. Maybe try listening to it in the store before you buy it. See if you're happy with that. But there are a lot of good units out in the market that are kind of loud. Just simply pushing the air through restrictive filters does produce noise. Okay, it's the nature of the beast. So, but there are filters again that do achieve good filtration and keep the noise levels, at within acceptable limits. So, try it before you buy it is the best advice I can give you. Something that your friend might find quiet may not necessarily suit your taste, so try it before you buy it in terms of noise level. Okay. Well, we have finished for now all the questions. I will wait here a couple of minutes, see if anyone from our live audience likes to ask. You can ask me in the chat window. I hope you can see the chat window. I will send you a message here right now. I've been told that the audience who are logged in from mobile devices cannot see the chat window. So I'm sorry about that. Feel free to hit me up on Facebook. I will leave a comment after the video with the web address where you can leave me a message on Facebook. And feel free to send me your questions there. Okay, we have a question from Gosha. In the city of Warsaw, are there any parts where we can have less smog, like where to live best? I really don't know. Smog tends to move around. It settles, but it does tend to move around. Whatever areas are serviced by district heating tend to have slightly less smog in the winter because there's less people using individual furnaces and burning questionable fuels in them, like garbage or low-grade charcoal. Last time I looked around, I noticed, for example, around the big district district heating plant in Shekerki, there was not a lot of smog there because the plant itself is actually well controlled. It doesn't pollute so much, and the area around it uses the heating from the plant, so they don't burn their own fuel. So I guess you should aim to live near a district heating plant that that delivers hot water to your home, so you don't have to burn your own sort of dirty fuel, and that helps. Okay, guys, well, since I'm not getting any more questions, we will end the webinar for today. Um, Once we finish, I will leave a link in the comments where you can reach me on Facebook and interact with me on Facebook if you'd like to ask me anything else. Thank you all for watching. It's been great to talk about this subject, and I hope you've found it beneficial. See you next time.